It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Huddle up.
On Giants.com.
Here we go.
And the Giants mobile
Get
app.
them in there, let's go.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Welcome to a front office edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by the City College of New York, doing remarkable things. Learn more at ccny.cuny.edu. Today we are joined by Giants General Manager Joe Schoen. Joe, going into day one of the draft, what were some of your objectives and goals?
There was probably 4 or 5 players that we coveted, that we thought that may be there as of our pick. So around pick 16, I think it was the Commanders' pick. That's kind of when we knew the draft would start, and there were still quite a few players up there that we liked, and we're a little bit surprised that they were still there. So we never really knew how the draft was going to unfold. So we had multiple plans. We had potential trade opportunities with other teams in place. So it was really unknown, but we needed to be prepared for every scenario that may present itself, and I felt like we were, and it actually turned out really well for us.
Did the top of the draft kind of fall the way you expected?
Yeah, the top of the draft fell. Maybe the guys didn't go exactly to the teams we thought they would or the slots they went to, but probably our top 10 to 13 players we nailed in terms of, hey, they're probably going to be gone before we pick. And then, again, once we got into the Washington, Pittsburgh area, we said, okay, well, this is where the draft really begins for us.
What goes into the decision to make a trade?
Yeah, the decision that goes into making a trade, we have trade charts that we use, and we have different, formulas that we use based on, whether it's Jimmy Johnson chart or something our analytics department put together. So you look at the value, you see if it makes sense. Are you going to, win, lose? Is it even? And then at the end of the day, if you lose a little bit, are you really winning because you're getting the player you want? Or for me, sometimes I look at the pick I'm giving up. Who do we like at that part of our board? And, if that player is so much better than what you're going to get at the, the pick you're giving up, it just makes sense. I've been there before where you're disappointed you don't get somebody you want, and the opportunity to get players that you like, you feel much better, at the end of the day.
Deonte Banks, what made him the right choice?
Yeah, Tay Banks was the right choice for us at 24. Again, prototype size, he's got speed, he's got strength, he's got physicality, he can play press man. He's a 4-3-6 guy that really fit what the defensive staff was looking for in a corner. So he ended up being the 4th corner off the board, in the first round, and he was actually an ideal fit for what we were looking for in our defense. And he was a guy that the defensive coaches coveted, the scouting staff liked, the coaching staff in terms of Dave's liked. So when you have consensus within the building on a player and his fit and what he can do for the organization, and he's there at the right opportunity, it's a win-win for everybody.
Day one is over, so now how does your focus shift?
Yeah, at the end of day one, you kind of take back, take a deep breath, see who's still on the board. You're excited about the player you got in Tay Banks. We were excited about that. And then we came in on Friday and, we looked at who was left, where we were picking, who we thought may be there. Is there anybody we would trade up for if they fall? Is there anybody if, these, 5 or 6 guys aren't there, maybe we trade back. So we go through those scenarios, and then we start making phone calls around us. Hey, there's a chance we want to move up, or hey, we may move back into the 3rd round, whatever it may be. So we kind of duplicated a little bit what we did on Thursday before round 1. We had a plan in place going into day 2 with the potential to move in different directions if we needed to, based on the players available.
Michael Schmitz, what made him the right choice?
Yeah, that was a tough one to sit on our hands and wait for because center was potentially a need. Again, we have a lot of confidence in Ben Bredesen, and John will come in and compete with those guys, but really liked his school film. I saw him play live. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He had a great week. The coaching staff, another guy that there was consensus between the coaching staff and the scouting staff. New York Giant DNA, through and through, smart, tough, dependable, and a good football player. So the fact that we were able to stay pat, and again, I had to sit on my hands on that one, and luckily he was there when we picked. The Bears traded up right before we picked him. There was a little bit of concern that may be a guy that they covet, Ryan Poles being a former offensive lineman. So that was a little bit of an intense moment when they traded up in front of us because, I think it was known that center was a need. So excited to get John and looking forward to getting him here.
In round 3, you're able to trade up and get another player you wanted in Jalin Hyatt.
Yeah, Jalin Hyatt's another guy that we had graded fairly high on our board. And, when we got into the 3rd round, he was sticking out a little bit like a sore thumb. So as we're going through, I talked to Tim and Dennis and Brandon and said, hey, let's start making some phone calls and see if we could give up our 4th. When does it come into play that we would just have to give up our 4th? And, Sean McVay had actually texted Dabes the night before. So, Dabes is like, hey, what if I text McVay? I'm saying, yeah, go ahead. So we typed in the terms, and Dave sent it off to Coach McVay, and eventually they called us back, and it worked out. Jalin was a guy, again, he brings us some height. He's over 6 foot. He ran 4.3. He can stretch the field, and that's something that we thought maybe we were missing a little bit of last year, is the ability to stretch the field. And people want to play tight boxes against us with Saquon, and this gives us a chance to go vertical if we need to.
You've talked about relationships around the league. How much does this help in the draft?
Yeah, it's very important for, not just myself as a general manager, but, Dennis Hickey, Brandon Brown, Tim McDonald, to have relationships around the league so we can make these phone calls and these guys pick up the phone if you're calling to make a trade or potential scenarios. If you have a good relationship with somebody and then you're on the clock or scenarios are unfolding during draft day, it's easy for them to pick up the phone and give you a call because you have prior relationships. So I always go out of my way, whether it's league meetings, combine, owners meetings, to make sure you continue to form those relationships with other general managers and personnel directors around the league, and you never know when that relationship's going to come in handy and you can get a deal done.
How important is day 3 to you?
Yeah, day 3 is very important. I think you saw it last year with some of the players that we were able to get. Bellinger, Belton, DJ Davidson played some snaps for us. Unfortunately, McKeithen got hurt and Beavers got hurt. But those were all guys, and then McFadden played meaningful snaps. So sometimes you can get starters out of the day 3, and then sometimes you get some really good depth players and contributors or special teams players. So excited about some of the players that we got in day 3. Again, they'll come in, they'll compete. Maybe it starts off on special teams and depth roles, and again, maybe based on the character of the kids, they develop into starters. So looking forward to those guys getting in and competing, and whether it's depth roles or starting players, they're equally as important.
Let's go back to Hyatt for a second. You were on the field for the Tennessee-Alabama game, and he goes off. Was that a perfect storm?
Yeah, I did attend the Alabama-Tennessee game, and it's funny because Tillman, the other receiver, was one that was super productive the year before. So he was kind of the guy you're going to see, and then that was Jalen Hyatt's coming out party, and you're like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Oh, he's an underclassman, but he's draft eligible. So when you saw his speed live and the production he had against that Alabama defense, a coveted Alabama defense coached by Nick Saban, that's kind of his specialty. You're like, okay, who is this kid? And the more research we did, we continued to follow him, and he continued to elevate his game each opportunity he was given. So that was my first exposure to him. Again, he really wasn't on the radar. That game obviously put him on the map, and then we continued to follow him, and he continued to answer each question throughout the process in the spring, and we're fortunate to have him.
Okay, if you can give me just one line on Eric Gray.
Yeah, Eric Gray is a quick, explosive, instinctive 3-down back that we're excited to have.
Trey Hawkins III.
Big, physical, long, fast.
Jordan Riley.
Big man with length, strength, can hold the point, and can defend the run.
Javarius Owens.
Tall, long, fast, deep field safety that can come up and strike you, but also can play in pass coverage.
How important is the communication between your entire staff during the 3-day process?
Yeah, the communication throughout draft weekend is very important between whether it's the executive staff, area scouts, national scouts, whatever it may be, just to continue to have dialogue, talk through scenarios, which players, make sure we have the medical, the background, everything's airtight. A lot of these meetings and conversations have been had leading up to the draft, so when you're on the clock, we've already went through A to Z on each player and who we would take in different scenarios. So the communication leading up to the draft is important, but on draft weekend, it's equally as important just to make sure that everything's airtight before we turn in the card on a player.
We saw Coach Brian Dable had his coordinators pop in to give their input. How does that work?
Yeah, it's important to have the coordinators on board when you're drafting a player, and they do a phenomenal job. We give them an extensive list of players to look at, and it's obviously more daunting for the coordinators because the list is longer than the receiver coach or the D-line coach. They've got to do all the positions. So we do like to bring them in if it's 2 players are on the same line on the board, and where the roster is now, maybe based on who we've drafted previously, maybe you go with a different player if they're in the same conversation based on need. So I like to bring them in. I like to give them ownership in who we're taking. They're, if they're motivated to coach guys, there's always a better chance for success for the player. if you have a coordinator and position coach that are motivated to work with them.
Can you talk about the hug between you and defensive coordinator Wink Martindale after you took Deonte Banks?
Yeah, when Wink came in, we took Tay Banks. He was obviously super excited. And, it's something for his defense that's very important, having two good corners. So with Tay Banks and Adoree, I think, the defense has taken a little bit more shape in terms of what he wants it to look like. But Tay Banks was one of his favorite players in the draft, and when we were able to get him, he was obviously very excited, and my back's still a little bit sore from that bear hug he gave me.
This year we saw that you FaceTimed the players during the draft. What went into that decision?
Yeah, we FaceTime most of the players after we drafted them. Just thought it was a nice personal touch. They could FaceTime, see everybody that was in the draft room, kind of bring them into the draft room, and then we could also go to them. And a lot of the players showed the camera or their phone around, and we could see their families, moms, dads, friends, teammates. So it was really cool. It was a nice personal touch. We enjoyed doing this year, getting to communicate with not only the player but their family and friends, and really special moment for the player and the organization as well.
We thank Giants General Manager Joe Schoen for joining us on this episode of the Front Office edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. We'll see you next time, everybody.